on stage. This is the players panel. You can put your hands together. This is not in order of importance, but I think it will actually be in order of size. My first guest on stage, Derrick Brooks, NFL Super Bowl champion and founder of Derrick Brooks Charities. Thank you, sir. Swin, Olympic gold medalist and 3-time WNBA champion. Aimee Mullins, Paralympian, world record holder, actress, advocate, and all-around wonderful human being because she's from Pennsylvania. So.
Wait a minute, I'm from Pennsylvania.
I didn't know that. It's all love.
Wonderful.
It's all love.
Are you from Pennsylvania?
See, we got a Pennsylvania reunion going on. We had no idea. A local favorite. We're actually standing in the midst of the place that he plies his living, does his thing, tries to absolutely get some rings. No pressure. Mark Teixeira, World Series champion and founder, Mark Teixeira Charitable Foundation. And we figured we'd end this panel with a little horsepower. Rusty Wallace, NASCAR Hall of Famer and NASCAR Foundation board member. Please, Rusty. Excellent. Please have a seat. So we had a little discussion upstairs, and now one of the things that they got a chance to understand about me is that I'm a little rapid fire. I came at them, they all leaned back except for Rusty. He was leaning into it. He's like, come on, little man, bring it. I love it. More. Give me more power. So we talked about all these things that we've been hearing today in the conversations, but we know that you all are asked to do these things when you're actively playing or what you're doing right now or in your retirement. But there's something that inspired you. There's something that really lit you up. But I think that in many ways, we're not asking athletes, how do we engage you best? How do we absolutely find a way to inspire you so that you want to participate in the things that we're talking about? How do we create that shared value proposition for you all? And I think that the audience would love to hear what's the best way to approach you so that you want to stay engaged long term. The questions, the conversations, the kinds of things that we need to be able to speak to you so that you'll want to be invested in. So whoever wants to start off with, it's fine. I love it when they all be quiet, right? That's good, right? That was a good move on my part.
I'll tell you, Kevin. I think I'll say for myself, and I think you got to ask. You know, if you don't ask, you don't know. My parents always told me the only question and the dumbest question is the one that never get asked. So I always tell people, just ask and give us a chance to engage, but be willing to accept our answer, whatever it is. So I encourage people to engage in conversations with me all the time and accept what I'm able to give back, whether it's 30 seconds or maybe it's an hour, but be willing to accept what I'm able to give back to you.
And do you think that in asking that way, you're more invested when they're coming to you, as opposed to it being, you have 2 required appearances and we expect you to do this, and then they're pulling and dragging you to something? Is that the case in many ways, or would you prefer it to be where they're asking you and having a conversation about it?
Well, I think when you ask the questions, now you open up and give me a chance to respond where you can gauge my interest. Rather than something being required and the finger always being pointed at you, you can have a conversation to me and see what drives my interest, one. And secondly, you can be respectful of whatever time we have to give. And I think that's one of the misconstrued things when you talk to athletes and celebrities of alike is people always ask it more, but they don't concentrate on the substance of what they're able to give. You can ask 3 hours of someone to do something and have no substance. Or you can reach and get substance out of someone that you spend 30 minutes with. And I think it goes both ways when we're engaging, especially with youth. You know, I tell kids, I don't have to sit there and talk to you for an hour to figure you out, just like you don't have to listen to me talk to figure me out because we truly engaged in conversation.
That's a good segue. See, that was nice. You cut that right off, nice and smooth. Aimee was nodding her head, yes, yes, yes. So you want to hook on to what Derrick was sharing?
Well, no, about the substance, the quality over quantity. I think that's, I think that as players and as people who've reached a certain level, in sport, we're asked a lot by a lot of people, especially for time, resources, whatever we can give. And as we were saying upstairs, I find that the vast majority of athletes that I meet are very generous people with their time and whatever resources they can give. But I do think that there is this expectation of quantity rather than quality.
And I'll jump on that too. My thing is to not assume. And it really is funny how many times I've sat with, whether it's a sponsor or even my own organization, and they'll say, well, we have this event, and I know you went to the University of Tennessee, and I'm like, I went to UConn. But it goes back to not doing your homework and understanding your players. See, if you do your homework on the front end, you should know what school they went to, what things they're interested in, because then you can sit down with me and have a conversation. You'll know that I went to the Boys and Girls Club when I was younger. That's something I may be interested in and want to be invested in. You'll know that my aunt passed away with breast cancer, and you know what, that's a cause that maybe I want to latch onto. I think that the players having a connection an investment in something is when the authenticity, I think, comes out, the genuineness comes out, and that's the point you want to get to. You don't just want to say, well, you know what, here's the star player on this team, they're going to bring me the most likes or the most followers, so let's just have the star player do it. I mean, and I'll just finish this up real quick, is the thing that embarrasses me the most is that when people put star players on things that only show up for 10 minutes to do something.
Yes.
And then you're like, they don't represent me because I know for a fact that she doesn't do an appearance. She may do one appearance the whole year. So people can see through that. So really get to know your players and understand what they like.
We talked about authenticity a lot. Yeah, and absolutely.
I like the quality over quantity. That's what I try to do. I try to do things that really can move the needle and make something happen rather than do just a ton of little tiny things that go totally unnoticed. I try to spend some time and really give it my all. The NASCAR Foundation, which I'm part of now, which started in 2006. When I quit driving a race car, I was asked to be on the board. That's something I felt like I could help move the needle on because I knew the drivers. I knew I could talk to the drivers. I knew there's some cool things that we could do with the NASCAR name. It really legitimized a lot of the foundation. So for me, putting a lot of quality out there and do some big events that made people understand what we're doing and try to raise some big money is something I like personally being involved in, rather than just a whole bunch of little things that wear you out, that go totally unnoticed, and people don't reap any rewards whatsoever out of the people we're trying to help.
And to piggyback on that, it's as athletes and as sports franchises, we know to play to our strengths. Personally, I enjoy being with kids. I enjoy teaching them baseball, but also talking about my experiences as a young student athlete, going through high school and college and those challenges. In the same vein, you wouldn't ask a guy who is not comfortable speaking in front of a large audience, someone who isn't very good at public speaking, you wouldn't ask him to do an appearance where he's talking in front of 500 people. That's going to be, not very beneficial to the organization or to the athlete. And then he might say, you know what, next time you ask me to do something, that was a nightmare, I'm not doing it again.
I think it's also, one of the challenges is your time, right? So you're making a living, as this athlete, and there's an expectation, right, that you're going to be exemplary. The only reason that you're doing what you're doing is you've practiced a lot, you've invested a lot of time. You had to invest that to get to this level. So now when you're being asked to go and do these appearances, now your coach is looking at you, right, or your advisors or whatever, and they're saying, well, you know what? We got this big fill in the blank coming up, and I really don't want you tired or overworked or da-da-da, and now you're torn. Because you do have a personal interest in something, but yet you also have these responsibilities and people who are holding you accountable from a professional standpoint. And I think that's the double edge of the challenge for many of you, and it probably continues to be that way, especially if you're actively doing what it is that you do for a living. And I wonder how you manage that, because I think that's really a bit of a dilemma for a lot of athletes.
But time management, we all have to go through it, and to me that's all individual based. When doing that, that we have to dedicate X amount of time to perfect our craft, but it's other times of the day that we can go and connect with our cause. And I think if they get to know you as an individual, whether it's a coach, whether it's an organization, they're going to respect that because that's what they want. You know, they recognize that winning is going beyond the white lines on the football field, is going beyond the wood or the court, is going beyond the diamond as well as the track, because winning is for the community. It's not just for us individually. So I think time management is key, and you prioritize your time. Everyone here knows you get done what you want to get done. And that, to me, it sums it up that simple.
But isn't it also, I would think that athletes are very different now, right? I mean, social causes are in your face. You guys are on social media just like anyone else. You're seeing a lot of the atrocities and challenges, natural disasters, and how can you can't ignore that. You have to really like burrow your head down to ignore those things. And I think that's part of the challenge too, is that when you're feeling this pull and tug in your community and you want to help, it actually could help you be a better athlete in many ways, I think, because it's a holistic individual that we'd want. And I think that it could feed that too, right? Your ability to play well because, hey, I'm playing for my community. I'm supporting my community. I know my community needs this. Is that something that you would think is also an approach of yours, that there's a different attitude with athletes now?
I can say that the best times that I've had is when the organization from a basketball standpoint or operational standpoint is communicating with the community relations department and then with the players. Because if we're all working hand in hand, you'll know the schedule. You'll know when you can't schedule an event the day before we're playing LA or we're playing a big game. You'll know when to do that. But when you're not talking amongst yourselves, then it makes our job hard because you're bringing me something that I have to do. I have a game day. Now I have to make a decision. So you basically take that away from the player whenever you're doing your job on the front end. And sometimes when you have organizations that are not doing that, it puts the pressure back on the players. Of course, we hear about it all the time. Things are in our face. Players want to be philanthropic. We want to. I mean, trust me, players want to. And I've even had rookies, younger players say, hey, how do you do this thing? I see you doing this and I want to be engaged. What's the best way to go about it? So we're constantly talking about it. It's about you engaging the player on the right platform so you guys can then grow together. And that should be part of your brand, the organization, and whether it's corporate or whether it's, you know, Yankees, Chicago, I mean, whatever team that it is, your brand should be engaged with the community. So when a player comes in as a rookie, they know that I'm going to play and win a championship, and I'm going to help in the community. It goes hand in hand. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Aimee, you're involved with governing bodies around sports. And what about that? Because that's on a higher level of the expectations and asks of athletes and what they're expecting. And how would you look at that from that perspective and share some thoughts around that?
Well, I have to say, I don't think any athlete is going to jeopardize what they need to do to play at their best. I mean, I don't think athletes who get to this level have a problem drawing a line and saying, you know, actually I really need to say no to this one because of this very good reason. And I haven't been in a position where that's held against me. Like for instance, with this summer with the United States Olympic Committee, I mean, I was named the chef de mission, and that's a huge honor and a responsibility as well. And they happen to know that in another part of my life, I'm acting, doing films, and I had a film set for a few days before a closing ceremony. And, you know, I was upfront about that and said, listen, I will be happily pass on this, and if this is going to be an issue. And they were really happy for, again, the quality of time that I could give them and the time that I could give it to them. The other thing about what you were saying about social media is that leagues and governing bodies, if you want to market your athletes properly, you can learn a lot about who they are and from their social media. And you can learn a lot about the causes individual athletes care about. I mean, I'm sure that you've talked about the Boys and Girls Club. I'm sure you've talked about breast cancer research at some point on your social media. So that's where I find that, yes, we have a lot of requests on our time and we're pulled, but because of social media, if you can use it in a savvy way, you have an opportunity to galvanize support much more quickly. Like the athletes that I saw, I mean, for instance, Julie Foudy pulled together an auction for Hurricane Sandy, like within days. And it was boom, boom, boom on Twitter. It was athletes coming out of the woodwork. Hey, I'll give you my signed, you know, the beach volleyball teams. Like, I'll give you my signed uniform. You know, and it was just going for money. It was really, and this was not something that Julie Foudy couldn't do while she was sitting there waiting for her daughter to come out of kindergarten. You know what I mean? She could manage this on her social media feed. So I think we're seeing really savvy athletes use their individual brand to really affect change and move the needle, as to what Rusty said.
I'm seeing the knowing nods here. You want to hook on to what Aimee was just sharing? Either one?
I think one thing that's important is that every player does want to be involved. Every player wants to do as much as they can, but you have to say no at some point. And so as an organization, if you go and ask a player, you know, please do this for me, if they say no, you know, you can't, you know, make them feel bad about it. You know, if I went to every event that I was asked to do, and everyone would probably say the same thing, every event, every appearance, signed everything for every charity, everywhere, we would never eat, sleep, or breathe. And so we do have to understand as organizations and as athletes that we are working together. And if you say no, it's not because you don't care. It's because that, you know, I have a lot of other things going on. And organizations that kind of do the soft sell, let's make it a partnership. Let's talk about this. Let's be very communicative about what we can do together. That's the better way to do it, rather than do this, and if you say no, they get all upset.
And I think you mentioned that integrated effort, right? That
Yes.
making sure that you're finding a way that everybody's communicating, right? So the business operations side is communicating with the sports side, right, and the team side.
I can honestly say, I don't think I've ever been used up. You know, there's a lot of requests, and you look at them, you look at the ones that make a difference, like I talked about earlier, and you agree to do those. And then you get involved with people that really are buttoned up, and they know how to organize this. And I keep going back to our foundation, the NASCAR Foundation. That's real buttoned up. I mean, I got people up with me today to make sure everything's smooth and going well. And we've given away $15 million since we started our foundation. And I really feel like if you get yourself involved with the right people instead of the wrong people, and don't overpromise, and have fun at it. That's another thing. I want to come up here and feel relaxed. I don't want to feel rushed. I feel a little rushed because I've got to catch a plane later.
But are we helping? But
anyway,
are you having fun, Rusty? Are you having a little fun right now? I mean, I want to make sure, because I'm here to please, right?
No, you know what? You're doing great. I'm having a lot of fun right now, and there's some cool people I'm hanging out with, and I sit today during the sessions and listen to those, and learned a lot from a lot of people. But I learn a lot listening to people. And again, I'm up to speed on, you know, not getting yourself used up, so you don't want to do this, because you want to do it. Like we were talking, all the athletes want to give. They want to raise money. They want to give back their time. They want to use the popularity, what we had in the past, to help drive some awareness and drive some cash coming in. And I will tell you, the things I've done in the past, I've built a lot of friendships. People that I remember for a long, long time. And when I left happy. And there are a couple way back when where I left going, man, I'm not doing this again. This was a pain. And I showed up and there's 7 people. It didn't do nothing, you know. But a function like this is fantastic. Some of the big things we do at the foundation is fantastic. We're doing some exciting things I love doing. I'm a big car guy. So at the end of the year, we're heading. Yeah.
Are you really?
We're heading to Bear Jackson car auction out in Scottsdale, Arizona in January. We built a really cool Mustang we're going to sell for the foundation. We think we can sell it for like $250,000. But we're going to have a lot of fun with stuff like that. So I like to get myself involved in things that I enjoy, that I feel like I'm doing, that really making.
Just know that there's some people up here with some long money. They might be able to buy that.
Yeah, there's some car guys right
Yes,
there.
absolutely.
And that goes back to playing to your strengths.
Yeah.
Exactly what Rusty just
What you're
said.
passionate about.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's what I think. It's you have to stay in your lane. Like, what's your lane? Stay in your lane, and then execute, activate. And I'm big on that. Like, I love to do creative things that'll engage my kids, because I know that they'll take that experience and then they can use it in school. They can use it at home. So and I was big even with the WNBA on this. We did a lot of different Read to Achieve events. We're big on education, but me going and reading to a kid, what am I doing on top of that? I can read a book, but you know what? I want them to be able to read the book to me. So how are we engaging them more? And I think that's the big thing. Be creative, be authentic, and keep things going. Activation, it's important.
I'm a big believer in reading, and I know that reading makes you better, and I know that. I've witnessed it. It's a powerful thing. I want to ask you all, a pointed question, if you will. I'm going to be a bit of a journalist now. Can we have the slide, please? You expect athletes, sports figures, to contribute to your local community, right? And there's this whole notion of believing that athletes should be role models, right? That there's an expectation of you, that you should have a responsibility. Now, Nielsen did this sample of about 1,100 people back in October, and this is what these 1,100 respondents said. Can you put that up, please? 56% agree that you all should be doing that, right? That it is an expectation of you. I don't necessarily get the sense that they're saying you better, but there's a hopefulness behind that to me. Would you agree, or do you have an opinion about that? Yeah. Athletes being role models, athletes, they're an expectation of being held accountable to do, to advance the community.
I would say yes, Kevin, but it's from the standpoint of being a human being, not an athlete. When I look at what we do, that's a job. But what we wake up every day, the first thing we hit the ground, we're human beings. So I believe we're role models because we need to set the example for each other as a human being, and the role we play would lead to that. Some of us are parents, sons, daughters, whatever it may be. I believe that approach in being a role model is setting the example because that involves everybody, not just athletes. And everybody can make a difference in our community, not just athletes. So I embrace it. It allows another level of accountability in the job that I do or did for years, and I want to be held accountable to that. So I had no problem with it. Now, the role model in terms of what their expectations are of me, some may think it's on the field, some may think it off the field, but I don't get into, that judgmental part of it because I want to be the best human being I possibly be. And I tell people all the time, get to know Derrick Brooks. Don't get to know number 55 because you won't know number 55 because he's on Sundays. But Derrick Brooks, he lives forever. Right. So that's what I challenge people to do, and that's why I have a problem with it.
That's well said. I also love the fact that you said this whole notion of human beings. What was wonderful was we had the Young Advisory panel here, right? And they're in the room here. And Mark, I'll throw this to you because you got a shout out during a conversation from one, Emily Pena. And she talked about how Harlem RBI has taught her how to coach and has empowered her to raise her voice. And to Derrick's point, she is also now advancing others. There are pairs of eyes looking up at her, looking up to her. Right? But she's not wearing a number on a certain day of the week and, people coming and lauding her and, celebrating her that way. But they are in her community looking up to her like she is playing with this backdrop in this stadium. And I think that's wonderful. So she really professed how powerful the lessons are within Harlem RBI.
And I think she brings up a great point. Harlem RBI is an organization that serves over 1,200 kids in East Harlem, one of the toughest neighborhoods in New York City. I've been on the board for 2 years now, raising money for the Capital Campaign. But she brings up a great point. I'll disagree that athletes should not be role models. They should be examples. Role models should be fathers. My father was my role model. Mothers, coaches, teachers. If you don't know me, if you don't spend daily hours every day with me, how can I really be your role model? I can be an example to you. And she is a role model to so many kids because she spends time with them every day. I think that's the difference. It's a fine line, and a lot of it's semantics, but really the coaches, the teachers, and our parents, those are the ones that should be our role models.
Anyone else want to hook on that?
I really agree with what Mark's saying. I never, it's interesting you saying that example because I was not always able to put my finger on what I didn't like about the role model thing because usually it's projected on you. I mean, I think it's okay if you choose, if you claim that for yourself, okay, but there is something flattening about it. There's something that can be dehumanizing, to your point, because people are projecting what they want you to be as an idea, and the fact that you are a human being who's going to make mistakes, and we take risks with things in order to keep growing. But it's much harder to do those things in a public way. I mean, I was saying to the Olympians and Paralympians this summer, I can't imagine. This is the first games that, there is no, anything you do is going to be documented, anything and everything. And, that is a different reality that young athletes are facing now. And, it's not to say that we don't want people to always, put their best foot forward. Of course we do, but I mean, I think that for a lot of athletes, and certainly myself included, if I had to account for the idea of raising someone else's kids by being a role model, and not, there was something I had done, a choice I had made because I worked with a certain fashion designer, and at the time, 12 years ago, it was a little edgy. I mean, it was in the Metropolitan Museum of Art last year, so it ended up being okay. History came down on my side, but at the time, I remember getting a letter from somebody who was really like, "Oh, my kids really looked up to you, and now they can't anymore." And I was like, "Well, why? I wasn't, I didn't do anything that wasn't part of my integrity." And I think that's the true north, the compass we all have to live by. Is like, can I look at myself in the mirror tomorrow morning? But that's not going to be right for every other person. And so parents do have to parent their children. And the role models, exactly to your point, Mark, are the people that very well. For me, I always looked at qualities in different people that I admire. I don't take the entire person and expect that everything they do is the way to live your life. There's certain aspects of their character or things they've done that inspire me. And I feel like that's for me, that's always been a good way to go through it, so that I'm not completely devastated when somebody I have unfairly maybe idolized turns out to be a human being.
And can I jump on that point? I kind of agree and disagree to an extent, because I agree with you, Mark. I love that example as far as us being examples, and then the role model point. For me, I think it's a little bit more deeper from the role model standpoint, because I feel with visibility comes responsibility. And we play a profession, and people are going to see us. Like, I can't hide the fact that I'm African American. I can't hide the fact I'm a woman. And so there are other young girls that are out there that may look at me, whether it's through basketball, whether it's through my philanthropic work, whether it's through the things that I say and that I do, whether it's social media or on television. So I understand that. I'm not saying I have to be your role model, but I understand there's a responsibility because I have visibility. And in saying that, I also think that we all, different socioeconomic backgrounds. And so I know for a fact, I grew up in poverty. I grew up our family on welfare. I grew up in a single parent home sometimes. And so I know there are other kids, whether it's through my charity, whether there are other kids that are reading about me, that I'm gonna need to speak to and pour into. And so I understand that, and I think as we walk that fine line of being examples and as role models, we have to understand that whether we like it or not, we're visible. So they're gonna label us, and it's just about what we're giving to them. And then whatever heat comes back from that, that's on them. But pretty much you have to know that you're visible. You're visible.
So I got to stand up because that's like you were preaching. I'm like, I don't know if the Holy Spirit came in here or something. I had to stand up. I couldn't help myself. But I also, in standing up, am going to conclude this. Leave them wanting more. Always a good move, right? So I want to thank each and every one of you for your time, your words of wisdom, but even more so, I think you provided and hooked onto all that we've been dealing with throughout this day. The whole notion of conversation, real voices, insights, perspective, connectedness, and community. And I think community is what you all represent, and we welcome you in the Beyond Sport United community, and we thank you. So please put your hands together for our players panel.